And all right, everyone, I have Penny Bradley back on the show because I wanted to do a quick episode. I know I don't pay for Zoom, so it's going to cut us off at 40 minutes. So I just want to get straight to the nitty grit. Penny, so happy to have you back on. And I had a whole bunch of questions that just built up, and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to ask Penny about this kind of stuff. I remember a while back, I listened to one of the podcasts you were on, and you were talking about the levels of government beyond what they'll teach in school and how of these, I don't know if you call this an NGO or a bureaucracy, but the Council on Foreign Relations, David Rockefeller, they have the CFR and the Trilateral Commission. And directly above that was what this is called Oberkommando, or I was trying to get like a cascading from the average person to maybe police, judges, middle management politics, the CFR, which is just cascading uply very simply and talking about these levels of power above the CFR.
Okay. Oberkommando is with the Germans in space. So they are off to the side.
Okay.
They interfere in certain places, but they really take more of a supervisory role. If we start getting out of line, they will put in their 3 cents worth. So, and yes, they, because of the treaties, they do have the right to do that. But here, Earth was considered to be a Anunnaki territory. It's not human territory. And that's a really big thing for us to understand, because most humans have trouble wrapping their head around that one. Now, I have talked to some of the folks that are in charge. They kind of pat me on the head, answer my questions. Sometimes they treat me with respect and sometimes they don't. So these are people I'm blood related to, but I wasn't raised around them. And at first they were very wary of me. They thought I was going to come in and try to take over and take their money and demand a title and blah, 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 blah. When they found out I didn't, they started opening up to me. So I do have to walk a line between what was confidential and what I can talk about.
I completely understand. I'm not trying to get you to go in sort of any sort of threshold of stuff you can't talk about. I understand that there have been repercussions with other disclosure you've had. I'm just asking random questions that I've always wanted answers to, and I'm trying to understand the world I live in. That's all. So don't feel obligated at all.
Okay. Top down.
Sure, yeah.
It was Marduk. Okay, Marduk, the Anunnaki, was who was in charge of Earth. And he has been tried and convicted and found guilty but repentant of his crimes against us. So he has been taken out of office. He still owns the place, but he's not in charge of the place. That's the legal standing. And the courts are with the galactic government. They're not here. So there's lots of layers to this, okay? Now, over him would have been the Draco. Now, when you talk to these elite people, they use Anunnaki and Draco interchangeably. But they are 2 different species. The Anunnaki look like us, but a lot bigger. And they have psi abilities that are off the charts. And the Draco are basically humanoid dragons. And both of them will eat us. And all of humanity's sky gods are one or the other. All of them. And they will all eat us. That's an important thing. Even in the Old Testament of the Bible, it talks about that what opens the womb belongs to God and was originally sacrificed, and he would eat it. So it's out there. It's not something I've made up. It's not something I've pulled out of whatever orifice people think I pulled it out of. This is something that's real. It's 3D. It's in our holy books. You're just glossing over it when you read it. So we have two species out there, and humanity as we know them, there are three species of humans here. Okay, you've heard the story of Adam and Eve. The elites use that story. They say there was a version of humanity that was here before Adam. That they were also a hybrid between Homo erectus and Anunnaki, the ones that look like us, but bigger. And for some reason that those folks did not meet the needs of the Anunnaki for a slave that was smart enough to do the work and dumb enough to not rebel. So they created the next version of humans, which was Homo sapiens. And they were compliant. They require a boss. They have to be told what to do. They get led down the garden path by the nose very easily. They can't think for themselves because it was bred out of them. Now, they had this perfect slave race. And that's what 80% of humanity is. The ones that came before Adam, they had basically died off. There's only two of them left that I know of.
Who are they and where are they?
I don't know. I hear them telepathically. So I know they're not dead.
Okay, wonderful.
So, but the Anunnaki didn't want to sit and babysit the slaves. So they created a third group to be overseers. And they're smart enough to think. I mean, that's the way it is. They have become the elite. They have been running things underneath the oversight of the Anunnaki for at least 5,000 years, probably longer. And they've been experimenting to see if Homo sapiens was smart enough to be able to handle things on their own. And the consensus is no, we're not.
Being brought down. Yeah.
So we are being returned to feudalism because the consensus is we are not smart enough to handle things on our own yet. And they've decided that there's too many of us. And that's what a lot of what's been going on is about. And I'm going to be careful how I word this so that you can put it on YouTube. You know, all of the good descriptors are banned on YouTube. So I'm going to be very polite about it. But that's what's going on. And the 80% of humanity that are pure Homo sapiens don't get it. Now, right now, we've got probably 15% of humanity are the elite race, which they call themselves Homo capensis. I am a hybrid between the two. the middle class is a hybrid between the two species. And the middle class is getting smart enough that if it were just us, they would let us go ahead and keep democracy. But if they're returning to feudalism, we are unnecessary. So people like me are at risk too. And as far as they're concerned in my family, I'm a throwback because the majority of my family is very deeply into the propaganda of religion and politics. So the fact that I rose above that level to be able to see through the bullshit was actually a shock to them. So, but I've had one of them tutoring me for 15 years. And that's probably the reason that I made the leap. He contacted me when he was 18 and he said, it was really cute. He says, "You're smart, but you obviously went to public school. You want to learn what you missed?" I mean, how can a girl say no to that? So, yeah, it's been quite an education. It's been difficult to talk to others about because once you see past the propaganda, you're in a different mindset, you're at a different level, and people just don't get it. And that was before the NSA decided to activate my memories of the Black Ops. So I was already an outsider when they did that. And when, unlike a lot of the newer SSP folks, when I got my memories restored, I spent 3 years figuring out what it was I was remembering. That's why I'm still telling the same story I did in 2016, because I spent that time already. I didn't do it on air where everybody heard it.
Well, Penny, you talk about these beings, these Anunnaki being a lot larger than us, they could eat us. It brings me into my next two-part question, A and B, is when you have things like the Devil's Tower that to me looks like it was a tree, a gargantuan tree, and you have
Mhm.
things like the Smithsonian that have been confiscating giant bones, and according to the Greek, he says they all have 6 fingers and 6 toes.
Yep,
Um,
he's
if
right.
okay,
He's,
yes,
he's correct.
these Anunnaki, were there tons of trees before they were, I guess, petrified like Devil's Tower? I mean, is it some one-off thing, or can you just speak to the origination and what is Devil's Tower and why the Smithsonian would want to confiscate all these giant bones and things like that? We just talk about those two things.
Okay, we have a standard operating mythos for humanity. Okay, all of the Anunnaki religions present humanity as the pinnacle of creation. These giant bones are physical evidence that they're not. And so the folks in charge are trying to keep it simple. You know, the old KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah, they would say that. Cool. Yeah.
That's what they're doing. They're removing the evidence so you don't have to worry about it. Now, my understanding, both from my research before I was activated and from what they've taught me, is the planet that was destroyed that left the asteroid belt behind. Okay, Earth, the top half of it or a third of it, came flying through space and hit the rock that was already here. And the two combined. And that's why scientists are now finding that there are two cores in this planet. It's because that chunk hit the rock that was already here. They got hot. They combined sorta, but not completely. And that the place that is the Pacific Ocean used to be flat or chopped up because it was the chunk that broke off. And as the planet spins, it's becoming rounder and rounder, and the continents are spreading over the mass of the planet. Those trees are from when it was that giant planet in between Mars and Jupiter. So are a lot of the giant bones, and the giant species survived in most places for a long time until they started eating too many people and the Homo sapiens killed them off. I mean, you can talk to Native Americans. They talk about that there were redhead giants that ate too much and ate people, and so they killed them. If you listen to people, native peoples, the truth is out there. It's just we have it in our heads that we're the pinnacle of creation. And it means that as long as we think that, we're not going to listen to the real story. And the real story is that we were created to be a slave race. The Bible even says so. You were created to serve God. Who's God? The Anunnaki.
Okay.
I mean, it's in your face. And Mario Baglio, the Vatican translator, he has translated Genesis exact, not what people are thinking of, but exact. And I can send you the link for his book. And it flat out says that the gods came and created humanity in their image to be slaves. And that, it goes right along and says it. The only reason you don't know is because they translated it into Latin, and then they translated it into English, and then they fought over what they were going to put in it. And now we've got 20, 30, 40 translations that no two of them agree. So.
Okay. The next random question I had was I wanted to know why the cultures or the groups of Roanoke and the Olmec disappeared, if you know anything about any of that.
I don't know about their particular histories.
Okay, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. I had tons of stuff.
There's lots of small groups over the course of history that did really great for a while and then just died out.
Okay, no, not a problem. Okay, also, I was mentioning to you, we had a discussion about this before the show that Alex Jones was invited to Reykjavik, Iceland, Peru, and South England to join the elite in their events and some outdoor events. And you started discussing how these elite are related to Cain, and that's what they want to keep a secret. Are you able to talk about that, or is that a subject we need to stay away from?
It's out there in books that people are not reading, so I guess I can talk about it. If you want to read about it, my distant cousin, Nicholas DeVere, wrote a book. It's the title just blanked. It's The Dragon Legacy. And he's a bit of a drama queen when he writes. So he makes it sound a whole lot worse than it really is. Just thought I'd toss that out there. The core of what he says is probably true, but the details, he goes a bit off the wall. But he talks about it. And he has another book, The Dragon Seed, CEDE, where he tracks the bloodlines back to Cain. And these were both based on documents he found in his attic. And yeah, we share a great grandfather. So this is my family too.
I remember you talking about Clement and Sarah. Is that things you can divulge to? Does that somewhat have to do with what we're discussing in lineage and tracing back? Having Jesus having a son, Jesus having a daughter named Sarah.
Oh, Jesus the man. I'm putting it that way because too many people think of Jesus as a God and they don't want to hear about the man.
I want to hear about the man, please.
Okay, the man was of the royal house of Judah.
Royal House of what? I'm sorry to stop you.
He was of the royal house of Judah.
Spell that. Just spell that so I can look it up.
It's in the Bible. Judah.
Judah. Juda.
Yeah.
Okay.
He was of the royal house of Judah. That's how you say it. They didn't have a J in Hebrew. And as a king, even though he didn't have authority, he was required to have a wife. That's one of the first things that a king is supposed to do is get married and have a kid. I mean, that's first job. Second job is rule the country. So yeah, he was married to Mary Magdalene. And they had, according to my family, they had a daughter and two sons. And the daughter's name was Sarah. And when she came of age, they married her off to a Frankish warlord. And that's how the Merovingians became the Grail line. And what they don't talk about is the Welfens are also the Grail line because they.
How do you spell that?
Welfen. The Merovingians came down into what's today France. The Welfens went east into Poland and Austria and a place that today we call it Burgundy. It used to be called Bourguignon.
Yes, yeah. Known for its Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Southeastern France. Yeah.
Yeah, southeastern France. Now, they were allied with the Lombards, who went down into Italy, and they found Italy was almost empty because the measles had killed off everybody. When measles was first introduced to Europe, it was a very deadly disease. Very deadly disease. It killed off millions of people. And folks today don't realize how dangerous measles and mumps were when they were first here. We had no resistance to them at all. So, but yeah, they wiped measles and mumps wiped out the Romans. And
Not the Romans. That's why they had a downfall.
that's why they had the
Big
downfall.
downfall, should I say? Okay.
The big downfall was the measles and mumps wiped them out, and they were using slave nations as their soldiers, mercenaries, and they stopped having their smarter people in charge of the military. And after Marcus Aurelius, they stopped fighting off the Germans and started paying them tribute instead. And eventually the Frankish warlords especially broke through because they were being pushed by the Huns. There were just waves and waves and waves of Germanic tribes coming from Central Asia. They were being pushed by something that today we call it the Golden Horde. And the Golden Horde had a population explosion, and that created pressure on everybody. And that's why you had all these waves of tribes coming through. Now, all those tribes were related. They were all at one point one people. And they spoke similar languages, had similar customs, and they were all very much like the Spartans, with that military mindset and dislike of merchants. So they had their ethical system was based on being upfront and honest and no duplicity. And these are the people who took over Europe when the Romans died from mumps and measles. So, and it wasn't like they paint it like the soldiers came through and killed everybody. They didn't. They would come in waves and just sort of infiltrate, and then the warlords would marry the daughters of the Romans that were ruling the place. So the transfer of power was very organic. There were Merovingians who were still building circuses, they were still building colosseums all over Western Europe. It wasn't until the Catholic Church took over and basically outlawed reading and mathematics for the peasants that things got really bad. And you can go, that's one of the things that my relatives have been very clear about, is that most of the stuff that's blamed on the Germanic tribes, it was really the Vatican behind it.
Okay. So
And that was why at the end of World War II, the Germans went into space, was because they were tired of dealing with the Vatican and the bankers. They had spent 3,000 years of what they called Rome trying to kill them. And they were tired of it. So they went into space. And now the Americans are chasing them, still trying to kill them.
that brings me to my next thing. I was going to try and make a timeline real quick. If we can make it, to where that of a 3 or 4 year old could pick up on it and simplify the steps of how the Germans left. So I guess starting at World War II. Okay.
That's not when it started.
No. That's when they started building the craft, huh?
No,
Oh,
it's not.
you went
They
away.
started building the craft in the early 1800s. They had the Sonora Aero Club was manned by Prussians, and it was here in the county where I live, just
Okay.
north of Yosemite, and that was in 1850.
That was with Bismarck and Red Mercury.
Yes.
And this is you went and visit a grave site or something. This is coming back to me from memory. And it was a river washed a lot of stuff away or something.
Yeah, the river had washed a lot of stuff away. Well, they've been underground for almost 200 years. You know, this is a mountain community. Underground rivers shift, and when they do, cemeteries start falling into the river, and then you find bodies down the road. You
Okay,
know,
well, let's do so starting with the Scenario Club, if we could just hit significant events until they finally got all of their asses off of Earth and to the moon. Could we start from the Sonora Club and go to the moon, just kind of hitting significant events and
okay.
years?
There was a group that called itself NIMSA that was paying for the Sonora Aero Club and other stuff. In the 1800s, America, Prussia, and Tsarist Russia were allies, and they were working on this stuff together. And you actually get hints of that in some of the TV shows, The Wild Wild West. You see where they're chasing German crazy men through the wilderness. It's because the German crazy men were not checking in with the Secret Service like they were supposed to be. So it was there were you'll find hints of it in entertainment, but they were allies. They worked together on secret military equipment. And then when we had the Civil War, you'll find the South and the North both had much more advanced technologies that suddenly popped out during that war because they were using them on each other, like ironclad ships and heavy duty cannon and some of the other things that were going on. Okay, I believe they had clone technology in the 1880s. Now, you can have some kind of continuity because after 1870 or so, after our Civil War, you'll find all of these sightings in the public newspapers of these dirigible-like machines that are flying across the country, and they stop and the people talk to people, show them their electric system that's running the ship and all of this stuff. And it's based on the red Mercury engines. They're using antigrav, and they're going east from California to the East Coast and then across the ocean. And then you start seeing these sightings in Europe. So by World War I, the ships have already made it to Europe. And ships changed in that time frame. They changed from wooden ships to these really fancy iron ships, and then they had to work on the exact mix for the metals because the original ones were kind of fragile, and they figured out how to make iron ships, then steel ships. And because after World War I, Germany was told they couldn't have certain things, when it came to World War II, they had brand new equipment because they'd had to get rid of all of their old ones. So there's evidence that World War II, the Germans had an entire battalion of clones. Well, where did that technology come from? If they were of age to fight in World War II, they had to have been made in World War I to be old enough. Come on. Reality is, clones are still people. They have to mature. And that means that technology had been in effect For how long does it take to figure out how to do that? 50 years? And they had been doing that with the Americans and the Russians. So in World War I, Tsarist Russia was destroyed. The communists took over. Stalin was a Jesuit, so we're back to that Vatican connection. So that technology was taken from the Russians by the Bolshevik Revolution. So that leaves it in the hands of the Americans and the Germans. I'm watching the gears turning. So then we get to World War II, and the treaty that ended World War I was so harsh, it guaranteed there would be another war. There was no way that those people were going to survive that. And the only way they were going to survive as a people was to fight again. I mean, seriously, you take a good look at the Treaty of Versailles and you'll see that it was horrific. And the bankers decided to take care of the problem by printing cash as fast as they could, which made it where those that were on government pensions starved to death. No country is going to tolerate its war veterans and pensioners and widows starving to death. So the aristocracy found somebody that they thought would take care of the problem, and they were behind the scenes taking care of this. And once he had consolidated power, he pushed the aristocracy out and replaced them with Jesuits. So all of the horrors were done by Jesuits. And about that time, the aristocracy moved to Antarctica. What's now called Camp 211 was discovered about 1933. By 1940, they were in full operation, and the ship that had discovered the area was called Neuschwabenland, so that's what they called the base. And a lot of people want to pretend that it wasn't there, and they think I'm crazy. And yet the record is there from Admiral Byrd's Operation High Jump.
Yes, Admiral Byrd with the Navy went down there. Listen, it's going to kick us off in literally 30 seconds. Do you want to pick up same time tomorrow, or do you want to just schedule another episode next week?
We can wait a couple of minutes and come back.
Oh, okay. If you'd like to do that, sure. Okay, let me end this and then I'll send you a new link.
Okay.